Welcome to this explainer, my dear brothers and sisters. We usually think of different generations as, well, entirely unique, right? We love to categorize them by massive cultural divides, completely different tech, wildly shifting worldviews. It's so easy to just assume that a generation raised during the post-war economic boom has absolutely nothing in common with, say, a generation raised entirely on smartphones and social media algorithms. But actually, scratch that. If you strip all of that cultural noise away and look strictly at the raw financial data, like how we actually handle our money when the doors are closed, a totally startling pattern emerges. There is a fundamental, continuous financial mistake that literally plagues every single era. It's this crazy psychological and behavioral trap that we inherit, repeat, and then effortlessly pass right on to the next cohort. Okay, let's dive into this. What could possibly tie these vastly different age groups together when it comes to money? I mean, just think about the sheer contrast and how these groups experience their prime spending years. You've got the post-war crowd, who saw unprecedented economic expansion, the analog kids of the 80s navigating early corporate culture, the digital pioneers from the dot-com bubble, and, of course, today's true digital natives. They consume media differently, their career paths are totally distinct, and honestly, their values often clash big time. Yet, when researchers actually analyze their bank statements during their peak earning years, oh man, every single one of these groups falls into the exact same financial quicksand, completely derailing their long-term security just for a quick hit of short-term validation. To really understand how this happens, we have to look at how this behavior basically shapeshifts over time. The core financial trap hasn't disappeared, and no, it hasn't been magically solved by modern financial literacy apps or unprecedented access to investing platforms either. It's just evolved to fit the aesthetic of the decade. Like for a baby boomer in 1985, the ultimate flex might have been a massive wood-paneled station wagon, or maybe an absurdly expensive home stereo system just to impress the neighbors. For Gen X, it was all about that oversized McMansion. And today, for millennials and Gen Z, it's a perfectly curated hyper-aesthetic matcha latte in a minimalist apartment, or a destination weekend that is meticulously documented online. The disguise constantly changes with the times, but the core mistake, that deep human desire to signal status through immediate consumption, remains absolutely identical. So, what do we call this? Well, behavioral economists refer to it as the lifestyle generation trap. To truly wrap our heads around this, we have to talk about the psychology of the hedonic treadmill. The whole trap is built on this deeply flawed illusion that your current income is primarily meant to fund an immediate, highly visible lifestyle. It's basically confusing income with wealth. Every generation, the second they hit their peak earning years, gets sucked right into this behavioral loop. They start believing they need to live the lifestyle they feel they culturally deserve right now, rather than the lifestyle their actual balance sheet can support. And look, we are biologically wired to seek the approval of our tribe. But in a modern economy, we mistakenly use our paychecks to purchase that approval, completely neglecting the invisible, unglamorous work of building actual wealth behind the scenes. Now, what's really interesting about all this is how today the pitfalls are almost entirely digital. But let me tell you, the financial drain is very real, and in a lot of ways, it's much more dangerous. We aren't just trying to keep up with the Joneses next door anymore. We're trying to keep up with the algorithmic highlight reels of thousands of people. Studies consistently show that nearly 40% of millennials and Gen Z have willingly gone into debt just to keep up with their peers' lifestyles online. You log on and boom, you are immediately bombarded with expensive trips to Thailand, high-end restaurant dining, front-row concert tickets. The medium of delivery has shifted from the neighborhood driveway right to your digital feed. But the consequence is exactly the same. We are aggressively spending our future wealth just to buy a present-day stamp of approval. And this brilliantly illustrates the era of aesthetic wealth we're living in right now. We actively project this influencer lifestyle, right? The trips, the dining, the constant flexing of curated experiences. It looks like wealth, and man, to our dopamine receptors, it feels exactly like success. But behind the scenes, a massive portion of the population is running on absolutely zero savings. Zero. We've inadvertently created this culture across all generations where people are basically acting like influencers, but without the massive corporate sponsorships to actually foot the bill. And the stress of maintaining that dichotomy? It is exhausting. We're funding this illusion of wealth by actively cannibalizing our actual financial security, creating a relentless cycle of living paycheck to paycheck just to ensure the facade doesn't crack. But then, reality eventually calls our bluff. An emergency strikes. Maybe it's a sudden medical bill, a blown transmission, or even a temporary loss of income. A sudden $1,000 expense absolutely shouldn't be a financial death sentence. Yet, for the vast majority living inside this illusion, it completely breaks the bank. Data shows that nearly 60% of adults cannot cover a basic $1,000 emergency using their savings. Wow. That is the brutal narrative speed bump where the flashy lifestyle completely unravels. Because when a crisis hits, that aesthetic offers zero protection. None. The influencer lifestyle systematically neglects the fundamental need for a structural safety net, exposing just how incredibly fragile aesthetic wealth truly is. So how do we escape this? How do we stop funding the illusion and start funding reality? Honestly, how do we break this generational curse of looking rich but actually being highly vulnerable? Well, it requires a complete destruction of how we view our money. We have to fundamentally shift from a consumer mindset to an owner mindset. I mean, stepping right off that hedonic treadmill and recognizing that the primary function of your income isn't to maximize your current social standing. No, it's to buy back your future time and independence. We have to make a hard pivot away from immediate consumption and turn toward the structural realities of the finance market. So the crucial point is compound interest. Now, we all know the math behind it. The mechanics aren't exactly a secret to anyone who's taken a high school math class. But the real power of compound interest isn't mathematical at all. It's behavioral. True exponential growth requires time in the market, and time in the market requires the exact two things that the influencer lifestyle actively destroys: patience and delayed gratification. Compound interest is literally the ultimate countermeasure to lifestyle inflation because it demands that you prioritize the invisible future over the visible present. It is the quiet, unspectacular force that actually builds the real generational wealth that people are so desperately trying to fake on social media. Let's look at how this builds over time, because the opportunity cost of lifestyle inflation is truly astronomical. That money burned on keeping up appearances isn't just lost capital. It is the exact seed capital needed to trigger explosive exponential growth in the market. Think about it. When you choose to fund the aesthetic, you aren't just losing $1,000 on an unnecessary weekend trip. You are permanently surrendering the $10,000 that specific trip would have mathematically become over the coming decades. Literally, every single dollar spent on the illusion of wealth is a dollar permanently stolen from the engine of compound growth. It's the difference between staying stuck at baseline, constantly needing to earn more just to survive, versus building an impenetrable fortress of security that grows without your active labor. So we've seen the psychological trap that ensnared the boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z alike. We know the profound fragility of aesthetic wealth, and I think we all understand the indisputable opportunity cost of ignoring exponential growth. Here's the truth. The math doesn't care about your aesthetic, and the market certainly doesn't care about your social media feed. The only variable left in this equation is your behavior. So will you break the generational cycle? Will you continue to sacrifice your long-term independence for a temporary dopamine hit today? The next time you go to fund a lifestyle you can't truly afford, stop and ask yourself the only question that actually matters. Are you buying an audience, or are you buying your freedom?